Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Plan Prince George's 2035 Implementation and Infrastructure Task Force. I'm Tom Dernoga, Chair. I'm hoping we're going to see Ms. Walla Blagay, Vice Chair, joining us, and appreciate everybody coming. We've certainly have a lot of work ahead of us, trying to see how Plan 2035 is going, which we've had briefings on before. But I think for a lot of us, the essential issue is the infrastructure portion, because Plan 2030, development under Plan 2035, unfortunately, has been outstripping our ability to provide infrastructure. And looking at the budget that just came out on Friday, I had a meeting with the Laurel Volunteer Rescue Squad today, because several years ago, we put a new station in for them in the budget, and it got pushed back a year. And then today, you found out it got pushed off a cliff. And looking at the fire department budget, everybody got pushed off a cliff. So infrastructure costs are something that we don't have a handle on. So we need to assess what we're doing with Plan 2035 and how successful we're being and what we need to do. And we also need to look at what the budget implications of our development policies are, not to mention health impacts, environmental impacts, et cetera. So with those introductory remarks, why don't we go around the table and introduce ourselves. I'll start with our wonderful DOE director, and we'll go counterclockwise.
I'm Andrea Crooms, Director of DOE.
We should probably use the mic, yeah. They're theoretically streaming this, and people want to know who you are.
Nate Foreman, I'm a land use attorney, and I'm also the representative of the Maryland Building Industry Association.
I'm Ashley Green. I'm the Real Estate Development Project and Program Manager for the Redevelopment Authority of Prince George's County.
Matt Levy, I'm the Health Officer for Prince George's County.
I'm Marian Hannessy. I'm from the Commission, and I'll be staffing this meetings.
I'm Tony Feltz, Division Chief of Community Planning with Prince George's County Planning Department.
Ron Weiss, President of the Indian Head Highway Area Action Council.
Scott Rowe with the Prince George's County Planning Department.
Brian Halloran, Capital Budget Officer, Office of Management and Budget.
Walter Simmons, employed Prince George's.
Raina Hightower, County Council Staff, Director of PHED Committee.
Thank you. Kier McCune, Supervisor in the Community Planning Division in the Prince George's County Planning Department, and I was the Project Manager for Plan 2035.
Afternoon, everybody. Steve Brigham. I'm representing the Coalition for Smarter Growth.
Fred Tutman, longtime county resident. In my day job, I'm the Patuxent Riverkeeper.
Okay, thank you all. I think we have most of the folks attending today, one or two absences, a good turnout. Ms. Hightower, did we distribute the mission statement?
I will check with Ms. Honnessy.
It was just posted on the website.
Okay.
If you would like, we can get copies of the mission statement.
We can
and have them
email it out. I can read it. It's not that long because it's a mission statement. And so and it comes essentially from the resolution creating the task force. So the mission of the Plan 2035 Implementation and Infrastructure Task Force is to review the implementation strategies within Plan Prince George's 2035 and make recommendations to the County Council concerning how to best reconcile current development policies and regulations with the long-range vision of Plan Prince George's 2035. And matters of particular focus include strategies and mechanisms, 1, for limiting sprawl development, 2, for limiting or controlling haphazard development outside of transit-oriented development and local activity centers, and 3, for creating systems that address climate goals and infrastructure concerns. And as a part of the assessment of implementation of Plan Prince George's 2035 strategies, the task force will review the adequacy of public facilities, including staffing, and make recommendations for prioritizing resource expenditures and public investments consistent with the plan and the draft climate action plan. which one of these days we're going to make a final climate action plan, right?
The climate action implementation plan, which actually talks about how we're going to achieve these things, should be delivered to the county executive. It was voted on last week and should be delivered to the county executive for public dissemination within the next 10 days.
That is exciting. Thank you. Good to know. So we have an overview from our park and planning folks. Are you leading this, or is Scott Rowe? Okay, Mr. Feltz is up for you to do our overview.
Well,
Which
good
I think
afternoon.
we can find these on our screen, right? Presentation.
You have, everyone has a paper copy in front of them.
Okay.
Right.
Usually when it projects up there, we get it. I guess not.
Frame is left, so.
Guess not. You got a paper copy. So those on that side of the table can look at the screen, and us over here.
Well, it's looking like I can't advance it either, so.
Can you?
We had trouble with this last
Yeah.
week.
I was able to earlier, but I can't now.
It seems like the Wi-Fi's been having trouble in this building all day.
All right. Okay, there we go. Is it on your screens now, or is it still? Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Tony Feltz. I am the Chief of Community Planning with the Prince George's County Planning Department. I'm also a proud Prince George's County resident of District 9. I'm joined today by Katina Scholars, the Chief of Countywide Planning with the Prince George's County Planning Department, Adam Dodgson, who is a supervisor of the placemaking section, as well as our two Planning Department representatives on the committee, Kiera McCune and Scott Rowe, and of course, your Commission staff person, Marion Hennessy. We're happy to be here with you today at the first meeting of the Prince George's 2035 Implementation and Infrastructure Task Force. We anticipate in the future receiving direction from you all for further presentations and data for future meetings. But today my presentation is just meant to be introductory to Plan 2035. I want to give a little history and background and review the priority strategies and policies from the plan, as well as review some key indicators from Plan 2035. So Plan 2035 was adopted in 2014 and sets the county's vision and growth policy. And there's a lot of information in Plan 2035, but the key takeaway for you all from the plan is that when the County Council adopted Plan 2035 in 2014, it signaled a fundamental shift in the county's development pattern away from auto-dependent suburban sprawl and towards pedestrian and transit-friendly mixed-use centers. Plan 2035 lists 3 priority strategies to put the plan into motion. Number 1 is to update the zoning and subdivision regulations, focus on downtowns and the innovation corridor, and coordinate the capital improvement program review with Plan 2035 goals. Updating the zoning and subdivision regulations has been completed. The new zoning ordinance was effective April 1st, 2022 and had a 2-year phase-in period which ends April 1st, 2024. We are constantly looking at ways to improve these regulations. As such, CB 15-2024, which is known as the Omnibus Bill, is currently pending before the Council with a package of amendments that are designed to improve development outcomes for developments under the new regulations. So Chad Williams with the Planning Department will present the Omnibus Bill to the PHED Committee this Thursday, March 21st. So I won't get into really anything with the Omnibus Bill since that presentation is forthcoming. It should also be noted that this effort is consistent with Strategy CO5 and the Climate Action Plan, which calls for strengthening land use regulations to better align individual land use decisions related to smart growth, natural resource conservation, and green infrastructure.
Keep going.
You need a copy?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably heard.
Oh, I see.
Where's the?
I think he needs his, no, yeah. So the shift of focus to the downtowns and innovation corridor is bearing fruit. It's worth noting that Priority Strategy 2 is consistent with the Climate Action Plan, specifically Recommendation M-7, which calls for increasing investment in activity centers. To date, the county has seen new developments in Largo, including the new University of Maryland Hospital, MNC PPC Largo headquarters, multifamily developments, and the proposed Carillon development. New Carrollton has also seen a dramatic expansion of activity with market rate and workforce multifamily developments, the new WMATA headquarters, and a new Kaiser Permanente medical office building. And Hyattsville Crossing has seen new multifamily and townhome development, as well as new retail complementing the Prince George's and University Town Centers. We've also seen new development in the Innovation Corridor, including something we're very proud of in the county, our new FBI headquarters at the Greenbelt Metro, the College Park Discovery District with its multiple new STEM offices and new housing options, and in Branch Avenue and the Suitland RTD areas, we've seen new federal investment, and we're actively exploring placemaking opportunities in Suitland. For Strategy 3, the Planning Department is currently developing an update to the Master Plan of Transportation called Go Prince George's, which you'll be hearing more from Scott Rowe about in the future, to ensure that the MPOT aligns with Plan 2035, and that project is anticipated to be complete sometime in the next calendar year. The Planning Department is also preparing to present to County Council, actually tomorrow, their first set of priority CIP recommendations, and we anticipate that this will become an annual recommendation to ensure that we are really recommending CIP dollars being spent in alignment with Plan 2035 goals. So now I want to take a look with you at Plan 2035's priority policies and strategies. There's a lot of text on this slide and a lot of information here. The first of the priority policies is to establish and direct the majority of county resources and investment to designated downtowns to ensure their successes. The original strategy only listed Prince George's Plaza, New Carrollton, and the Largo Town Center as priority downtowns. And the focus of this goal has really shifted to include all 8 of the regional transit districts. Those are those yellow diamonds that you see on the map, and not prioritize 3 of those over the others. The new zoning and subdivision regulations and recent master and sector plans that we've worked on are all building on this strategy to concentrate growth in our centers. So details of the strategy include, as I mentioned, designating New Carrollton Metro, Largo Town Center, and Prince George's Plaza as downtowns for the county. But again, as I've mentioned, that strategy has evolved to include all of the RTD districts. Enact legislation to confirm the initial downtown designations and establish tax increment financing districts, parking districts, transportation demand management districts, and other targeted financial and implementation programs as necessary and appropriate to facilitate development of these downtowns and districts. Develop implementation plans for each one of the downtowns to examine their completeness score, and that's identified in priority strategies. Performing elements and prioritize resources and funding to address areas that require improvement. Encourage the relocation of government agencies, both county, state, and federal, to the downtowns to catalyze development and investment. Coordinate with applicable municipalities and other government entities to ensure meaningful input, active collaboration, stakeholder buy-in, and joint investments are leveraged to the highest potential. Prioritize capital improvement projects that encourage new private investment and create walkable communities. Some of those projects are things like public streets, streetscape amenities, underground utilities, and advanced information and communication technology infrastructure. Establish a by-right development approval process and fast-track permit process for the downtowns with clear and consistent regulatory standards and processes and shortened review periods. Establish a flexible framework of design standards to facilitate development in the downtowns while ensuring a high level of development quality. Reduce surcharge fees or exempt the downtowns from public facility and school surcharge fees to facilitate development, in particular for multifamily units. Amend the level of service standards or exempt downtowns from the adequate public facility transportation requirements to encourage development in transit locations. That since downtowns rely on multimodal transportation, bike and pedestrian standards should not be reduced. Market downtowns to prospective developers, federal agencies, nonprofits, and retail trade groups. incentivize compact development and use green building programs, update and expand the economic development toolbox to identify programs relevant to transit-oriented development, and evaluate future updates to our functional master plans and other plans to identify potential revisions with that goal. The next priority strategy is to support the development of the innovation corridor around College Park Metro and Greenbelt Metro and along US 1. As previously mentioned, the innovation corridor has seen tremendous growth in STEM offices and new housing choices, as well as the announcement of the new FBI headquarters at Greenbelt Metro. So strategies to continue this success include to define, and one of the things that we wanted to mention about the innovation corridor is really the idea behind this was to capitalize on some of the existing infrastructure that we have in this area, like the University of Maryland and the College Park Innovation District. That's why this area was specifically called out in Plan 2035. So the relevant goals were to define the boundaries and develop an implementation plan for the innovation corridor, designate the innovation corridor for tax incentives and targeted infrastructure improvements to retain existing and attract new employers, coordinate with the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation, University of Maryland, Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, College Park, Greenbelt, Riverdale Park, and Berwyn Heights, civic and business organizations, really to keep that momentum going in that area and make sure that we're all on the same page and presenting a united front. The next priority strategy was to look at neighborhood reinvestment and identify areas where communities and neighborhoods are distressed. This goal is to put plans and resources in place to combat issues like blight, disinvestment, and crime. The Planning Department is currently completing the Queens Chapel West Hyattsville plan, which is identified in that orange shading that you see on the slide. And we are developing the Port Towns plan, which is also near those orange shaded areas, and the Central Avenue Blue Line plan in order to address some of these reinvestment areas. Some of these strategies include identifying and applying existing county, state, and federal programs to address housing blight, commercial disinvestment, vandalism, and related issues. We want to evaluate identified neighborhood reinvestment areas to determine if new neighborhoods should be designated and if existing designated neighborhoods should be removed as they stabilize. Develop implementation plans for designated neighborhood reinvestment areas, which we're already working on some of those with some of our plans that we've got going on. And establish a long-term plan to commit county funding and resources, such as those from the Redevelopment Authority, to stabilize neighborhoods and municipalities and rehabilitate transitional communities before they qualify as neighborhood reinvestment areas. And finally, this last strategy aims to preserve prime agricultural and forest resources in the county. The Planning Department has worked to actively protect the rural and ag tier. That's that green shading that you see on the map. And Department of Parks and Rec in the county have been successful in securing conservation easements and limiting growth in this area of the county. So the 4 strategies to continue this success include funding the acquisitions of agricultural easements to permanently preserve agricultural and forest resources and allocate additional funding to the Historic Agricultural Resource Preservation Program. Develop and submit a Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation application to obtain certification from the state of Maryland and maintain that certification. Coordinate and continue to work with the Soil Conservation District and the Department of Parks and Recs on the acquisition of agricultural easements, and partner with the Department of Parks and Rec, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and nonprofit organizations to identify forest lands for acquisition, preservation, and permanent protection. And I'll just mention on that we've done a really good job at limiting development in the rural and ag tier. That's one of the areas where we're really hitting our goals in Plan 2035. And finally, to close out the presentation, I wanted to present the Plan 2035 evaluation metrics and what the plan really calls our indicators. So we published the last update on these indicators in 2020, and the next is due in 2025, so we're beginning to work on putting those indicators together. As I go through these slides, you'll see that there were far more positive indicators than negative, and I'm going to run through each of those with you. So on the positive performances, kind of what I mentioned, agricultural land preserved was up. Our bike and pedestrian facilities constructed were all up. Vacancy rates were down, which is right on target. Commuting patterns, crime rates, foreclosure rates, and forest planted and preserved areas all meeting targets. More positive performance, higher education attainment, households burdened by housing costs, housing and transportation affordability, LEED certified buildings, impervious services, occupied housing units, poverty rates, regional shares of employment, unemployment rates, and wage growth, all on target from Plan 2035 indicators. Neutral performance were the fast food restaurants by square feet, mode split between walk, bike, transit, and auto trips, and waterway health. And then what we saw on our negative performance indicators from 2020 were commercial versus residential tax base, county greenhouse gas emissions, household net worth, obesity and overweight rates, recycling rates, and vehicle miles traveled. And so that concludes our presentation today. That gives an overview of the key policies and strategies from Plan 2035. Again, our indicators from 2020. I'll mention that the indicators from 2020 are always going to be the same as those are outlined in Plan 2035. So when that report comes out in 2025, it'll be the same indicators, and we'll see how we're still doing on each one of those indicators. Hopefully, they'll all be positive, so we'll see where the data sets with that. And again, this is just intended to be a brief overview of where we're at and what Plan 2035 really describes. And we anticipate hearing from you, the committee, data and metrics and future presentations that you want for later meetings. So with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Nice overview. Any questions or comments from the task force? Go right ahead.
Mr. Weiss, go first.
Mr. Weiss and Ms. Crooms.
If you look at it's not going to be built. We have a police station that's severely undermanned. We had a homicide when 4 officers were on station, and they had to call all the other police stations to get reinforcements to cover that. So we see a lot of development, not in the green area. We see development inside the Beltway where we want it, but we see uncontrolled, in my view, development in the yellow area that the infrastructure doesn't sustain. And that's what I'm worried about.
Understood. I think a number of people agree with you. Does Tony or Scott have any comment or reaction?
Sure, I think it's really important when we're doing our plans that we're looking at the infrastructure that's needed to support growth throughout the county. And, it's no secret that the infrastructure investment has lagged behind development. It's a vicious circle that we'll come back to again and again. We need development to generate the revenue to construct the facilities to serve the people that are moving into the area. I do want the task force to be mindful that police don't respond from stations. So building new stations doesn't improve police service, unlike fire EMS who do respond from stations. So it's a lot of times we have staffing shortfalls when it takes forever for police to get somewhere. They're responding from out in the field from their vehicles and not from a particular station. When we build police stations, we take police officers out of the field to put them in that station, and so it actually harms the response. So they're differing issues, but similar overarching theme: need more funding to be able to provide those services.
You know, I think on that topic, what we see in our budget is tremendous police understaffing and a budget for which there's no capacity. I know we're going to be hiring more police officers, but we're not really gaining any ground. And I think what Mr. Weiss is talking about is, as you build more police stations, we went from 6 a number of years ago to 8, you're stretching the staffing that you've got. So they don't respond from the building, but if you don't have them in the car somewhere, they're not responding at all. Tony?
And one thing I would mention, just to build on what Scott said, is we're still actively planning in the established communities area. That's that yellow area that Mr. Weiss was talking about. And I think it's important to put on the record, every development that comes in still has to be reviewed for adequate public facilities and meet the requirements of the adequate public facilities ordinance. So there is a level of planning there. The idea with Plan 2035 is just to shift the majority of that development away from the established communities and to our centers. And now as we're kind of shifting also inside the Beltway in some redevelopment areas.
I think a question for the task force, this is, I think, a very important question. Do the adequate public facilities laws that we have work?
That's an easy answer.
Well, I didn't hear it.
That's an easy answer. It's no.
I was going to say that. You took my thunder. Come on, Katrina, come on up. You always have a seat at the table, Katrina.
See, I got you up here by me.
He's finally got me up here. Hi, everybody. My name's Katina Scholars. I'm with the Planning Department, Division Chief of Countywide Planning. So one of the duties we have is reviewing for adequacy with subdivision or preliminary plan applications. And we can do an overview of adequacy in the future. But when we talk about adequacy, we're talking about primarily transportation, police service, police responses, services, fire, schools. And I think Scott pretty much gave you the reason why police doesn't work, because the test that they currently use assumes that, you know, every police is leaving from a fire station and believes that they could get everywhere in 10 minutes for it. That's not correct. That's with the fire is adequate. I mean, there's a 7 minutes response times. They have a map. They know how long they can get because they're always leaving from a fire station. Schools.
If there's people in the fire station.
If there are people in the fire station. Well, that's another way to look at it.
Oh, that's an issue. And we also have not enough fire staffing, so that now the one thing we hear is they're losing staff because they're so stretched. They're working mandatory overtime, and people are quitting and going to other counties.
Yeah, and we don't look at it from that angle. I think that's another angle that it should be looked at, and I think that's something that's on our list. After we do this, you know, we're doing a fiscal impact study. That's probably next on the list.
By the way, I was going to touch on that. Could you explain that real quick to folks?
I'm going to defer to Tony on that.
So I think the RFP has already went out, if I'm not mistaken. But the planning department is currently putting an RFP out for some consultant services to look at the different types of development in the county and in different geographic locations in the county. And what it really aims to do is analyze the cost of providing public services to those types of developments in different areas of the county, and understanding, you know, what costs more to service, what costs less to service. And what we think that's going to show is that it costs less to service denser urban environments and areas around our transit centers.
Is that because every study that's been done before shows that?
Well, that's true, but we want to show it right here in Prince George's County. We want a study of the county so we can say, hey, what our assumption is correct. And if our assumption is correct, we're going to try to bring a package of what we think is going to be amendments with the public facilities ordinance to make some modifications.
Yeah, I remember when I was Nate Foreman's age, back in the 80s. They were doing these studies back then showing that single-family detached kind of pays for itself. Townhouses don't, and apartments, unless they're high-rise, high-end apartments, they don't pay for themselves at all.
Yeah, I mean, certainly density is a factor, but there's other, there's other factors, other costs.
Did you want to?
So, yeah, just because I'm going to talk a little bit on that study as part of the adequacy. The overarching thing with it, with adequacy and Plan 2035, remember, adequacy predates Plan 2035. In my opinion, and I've been dealing with it for quite some time, is that it's outdated. It doesn't align with the Plan 2035 goals. If you look at adequacy on a closer level, when it comes to things like the Brandywine Road Club and the PFFIP, those are out for significant, to allow a development outside of the centers and outside of the transit areas, in areas where the roads are not up to par and probably never will be, because in a lot of cases they depend on SHA doing improvements, which I know from meeting with SHA, they have no intentions ever to widen roads or do the improvements that are needed to handle certain capacities. So we need to pay attention to that as well, in addition to what the county can do as far as road improvements. So when you're saying to a 500, 600,000 unit subdivision that all you have to do is pay this money and you don't have to do anything, that's not meeting Plan 2035 goals. That's attracting development outside of those areas where we would prefer that density to be in. That's for, and I'm speaking specifically about transportation, if you, on that issue. On police is a test. If the police response time is under 10 minutes average for response time, it passes. If it doesn't, you can either pay a fee, or if you're over a certain amount, you can't get approved at all. Well, I don't believe anyone has paid any fees since 2014 or something. It's been a very long time, just to say. And the money that is to be paid is to be used for mitigation for police services, whether it's equipment or station or anything like that. We want to see how, and that's why I brought up the fiscal impact, because that's going to lead to us looking at if that's how that's being addressed, or if it has been, with the rate of growth outside that compared to what we're doing in the centers. So I wanted to just give you a little background. I have a whole presentation on adequacy, which I love to talk about, but I think the simple fact is that adequacy, the current adequacy regs outdate. Lastly, schools. For schools, if there's a capacity impact, there is no consequence.
Right,
So,
you fail but pass.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. If you fail, you still can pass. So.
For schools.
Yes, for schools.
So there's a test that's not a test.
It is not a test.
It's informational only.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
To follow
Yeah.
up with that? Well, first about schools. Now, this is before my time, but wasn't it decided that rather than doing the test for schools, it was decided to do a lump sum or, payment by the dwelling unit to compensate for schools? How did that even come about?
There's a difference. I think you're referring to surcharge.
Yes.
So there is a surcharge, and then there are mitigation fees. A surcharge is required for all residential development, regardless if you pass or fail. That is a subtitle 10. It's codified. I'm going to talk about that hopefully when we get out to the outside centers. I'm sorry. That's a P-head meeting. I'm sorry.
We can bring you to this.
I like the sneak peek. That's nice, actually.
But yeah, the surcharge is required regardless. So there is a school surcharge, and then there's a separate public safety surcharge. Those are always required. Mitigation is for failure. So when it comes to transportation, mitigation typically happens by doing the improvements necessary to meet level of service, unless there's some provision that allows you to just pay a fee. That's like the Brandywine Road Club. or pay a fee for one of the failing intersections. That's your PFFIP. I'm sorry, I cannot remember that long acronym, but I will.
Scott, you remember it?
Public Facilities Financing Implementation Program.
Yes.
I knew
Okay.
Scott would know.
Yes. And then there is police, right? If you are over the 10 minutes, but under, if you're at 12, 11, or 12 minutes, you pay a mitigation fee. So that's only if you fail. So even if you fail and you have to pay that fee, you still also have to pay the surcharge. And they are per residential dwelling unit. So.
Which can be waived. I think Mr.
No.
Foreman is more or less correct or in the ballpark with his point.
Schools? Or
Yeah, but the school adequacy test was in the Commission 2000 report, and then the county council stripped it out for plan, the 2002 general plan. Around that time, 2002, 2003, the General Assembly adopted the surcharge, and I think some council members in the industry have said we don't need to do school tests because we pay this massive surcharge. The downside of that is that the surcharge goes into the general county coffers for the specific purpose of paying school bonds on school buildings. Whereas if you have an overcrowded school and you add more housing, you've got an overcrowded school, there's no money coming to solve that problem. So those things, I think the justification came up around the same time, but they're addressing two different issues.
Okay.
And the PGCEA, the teachers union, has been arguing for years that we should bring back the school adequacy test. But there never really was one going back in time. There was always talk of one. But so you're basically correct. And
Okay.
You're not far off.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just one other question about the level of service for transportation. And I think this maybe is what you're getting at, we're talking about in the future, but level of service near New Carrollton is going to be different than your level of service E at Brandywine Crossing, just as being two different centers. And they're both treated the same at this point. So if you're trying to encourage development in the centers inside the Beltway where it's already more traffic, you're not going to get developers willing to come in there and do the transportation improvements to do the development.
I'm sorry.
Well,
So
E is E
no,
regardless.
E is not. It's technically
Sorry, F.
It's at F. Actually, the centers now, the certain centers are F because they're above the E, or they allow for a higher volume, and that happened with the update to Plan 2030. Update to the zoning ordinance where it allowed for more volume in the centers. So technically, it's not E. It's F, and Brandywine Crossing is, I believe, E.
Well, yeah, but sorry for the unspecific example.
No,
there.
let's talk about
But
it.
it's sort of the idea of encouraging development inside the Beltway is still going to have much more of a difficulty. You have smaller lots to work with, higher land prices, so you're already going to get maybe a smaller yield. And if you're hit with, a $3-4 million transportation improvement on top of that because of just it being an urban area, that's not going to be easy for most developers to overcome. And it's sort of the idea of, you want people already there, you want people in areas where they already are, well, they already have traffic, they already have issues, and you can't necessarily build your way out of it.
And I think that's why we need you at this table, Nate, because we want to talk about how to address that inside these centers and what the challenges that are. Mr. Nogue, I'm going to defer to him on that, but I think that's why we're here, to understand those challenges in there, especially with transportation.
And just to throw in, I think that's something that Go Prince George's is going to look at, right? The different level of services within the centers.
Well, yes, and level of service in general. I mean, traffic level of service is a 1980s model for how to do greenfield development. And we're not we are first tier suburb. We're not Charles County or St. Mary's. And I know many of our stakeholders want us to be, but we're not. And we can't develop in these areas and then hold developments or hold areas to a level of service created for traffic in a greenfield. It does have, you're going to have congestion because that causes, congestion is people and people is success. And so finding out what that mix is and finding out new ways to say what is adequate, how much can we absorb at any given time. That's the interesting point that we're at. And, this is something that this task force, I think, can work towards. And certainly we'll be looking at through Go Prince George's of how to kind of address that issue while realizing that we won't have a strict level of service E requirement just will lead to no development at all. And we can't go backwards either. Like, we're not going to tear down development to create level of service E. We are. A lot of people pass through here, don't stop, don't spend money, and then go to another county and then mess up our traffic. So, it's a big challenge.
That's been the case for as long as I've been doing this. I've heard that argument. I want to just hone this point and then go to Ms. Crooms. But the point is, on one of your slides, you talked about, this is for the downtowns, reducing surcharge fees or downtowns, amend exempt levels of service. So it sounds like the Go Prince George's is going to address that, but I think that's something that we need on our agenda. How do we help bring attention to the deficiencies in the level of the adequate public facilities ordinance in general? We should be weighing in on that, and that's clearly part of our mission, and specifically with regard to the level of service inside the Beltway. That's how we deal with that. This bullet was basically created 10 years ago, and so you and us have not moved on it. So now's a good time. And with that,
we agree with you.
With that, well, it's a chicken and egg. We have to pass it, but we're not smart enough to know what to pass. So we need you guys to tell us, then we can criticize it, because we know so much. Ms. Grooms.
So I think that what I wanted to ask really fits into a parallel with this, because my question was going to be, to what extent have we looked at and crosswalked the requirements that we're now seeing for federal funding that have a lot to do, frankly, with adequate public facilities, right? So we are having trouble getting things like the federal, and I'm going to try to not use any acronyms, the Federal Emergency Management Administration's Building Resilience, Infrastructure, and Communities Act, and that is one where our public facilities often don't come up to snuff. Like, we aren't able to get money because we don't meet their criteria to get money in areas where we know that we need it for climate mitigation and for just already existing flooding mitigation and challenges of how and where our community was built. And then, of course, there's the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And all of them really have changed the standards that we see around what is the expectation of what infrastructure exists in communities, which becomes challenging because in some cases we don't meet the standard for an EJ community because the value of the homes in the community is so high. But then because of the systemic disinvestment, both because of who we are as a community and because of some of the choices that we made in the early 80s that I've done a fascinating deep dive on lately, we just didn't make those investments, and so then we don't have the infrastructure there. So that's like one thing, and I'm sure that crosswalk maybe doesn't exist now, but probably fits well into the work that you're doing, Ms. Schillers. And the other piece that fits into that is, looking at stormwater as a public facility is one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing right now, is that we've treated stormwater in many cases as a private facility, not a public facility, where we have asked, in my opinion, developers have kind of pulled one over on us that the communities would be able to maintain certain stormwater features that they've now been there for 30 years and they've never dredged their pond, right? And so we're seeing failing dams, we're seeing these large projects that need to be done with communities not with money in the coffers to do them. And so, kind of how that all fits into this looking at what are these vital pieces of things that we're paying for, and having it include stormwater, now having it include resilience, right? And potentially as we are, how it also involves utilities, right? Because we do have limited control over utilities, but in a world where we are likely moving to full electrification, how that all fits into everything, because it's such a risk with our increasing temperatures. And then eventually probably EV charging. It does seem like that's the way the nation's going, and that needs to be accessible to people as well. As someone who drives in South County, and there is one fast charger that always has about 20 people in line at the Giant, so.
I think I know that charger. I think that's right by my house.
If you have an EV, you know that charger.
I think those are very important points, and those obviously align with some of our priority strategies. We want to make sure that we're in the best position that we can be in to apply for federal funding, all types of grants. So that's certainly something I would love to explore with your office in particular, and see if we can kind of synergize and see where we need to make adjustments, or if we need to make adjustments, so we can be eligible for that. And that goes along with some of our programs with sustainable community certifications and things like that. So we definitely want to make sure that those are aligned.
Do we have a representative from DPI on this task force? Because the idea about stormwater management is very interesting, but it's usually handled at, from DPI's perspective.
I don't think we do. I didn't draft the resolution that created this.
Yeah, DPI's, I just checked with Marion, DPI is not one of the representatives.
Well, we were kicking and screaming to be on the task force, so.
Yeah, just a quick question as someone without a major technical background on a lot of this stuff. So how are we defining infrastructure for this infrastructure task? Like, where does the boundary end? I mean, we're talking about a lot of different stuff, and I'm just trying to wrap my mind around what does it include, what doesn't it include in terms of what we're trying to address here.
I think we can debate where the boundaries are, but anything that the government has to pay for that would be capital, I think would be number one. So roads, stormwater facilities, schools, libraries, police, fire, down the list. Pull out the CIP of the budget and just read the chapters. I'm not being funny. That's really as simple as that. But in addition, a lot of folks, and I'm part of this, and I made sure this was in the mission statement, when you're dealing with police and fire, staffing becomes an infrastructure issue. So even though it's an operating item, and it's not what you would normally think of as infrastructure, if you don't have bodies, then you got a real problem. And as you develop, particularly as you develop further out, it's further distances, that staffing issue becomes a really big problem. And our biggest expenditures as a county government, you take school board away, it's police and fire, by far. And they eat your budget. You still don't have enough. You can't even hire. If you had the money, you couldn't hire them. But you don't have the money. So you're spending $25, $30 million a year in overtime just on fire. But to me, the infrastructure definition is basically what the capital expenditures of the county government are. Would you more or less agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Does that help?
And I think we agree with you about the personnel issue, because you can have all the police cars, all the police stations, all the fire stations in the world, but if you don't have police and firefighters in them, they're not going to help you, fight crime or fight fire. So that's something that we are happy to look at with you.
I think it's important to note that the things you don't build are infrastructure too, right? Because in many cases, we don't think about the green spaces that we had in Plan 2035, but places you don't build are also infrastructure. Trees are also infrastructure. Open space that helps us maintain other things is also infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And I'll add on to say parks is part of adequacy. Parks is establishing parks and open space under Parks and Recreation Department is part of adequacy. They do that part themselves, though, as part of our reviews.
Yeah, speaking of which, I think we want to wrap up shortly. This is going to be an overview, but we're having a great conversation. When it comes to parks, well, frankly, when it comes to your presentation and the metrics, what's missing is we've gotten updates on Plan 2035 in terms of success in meeting the targets for where development occurs. That's not in here, and it's getting better, but it's fallen short by a large measure, and I think that's something that we need to talk about. It's all Nate's fault, but
Well, you only gave us the tools to develop according to the general plan since 2022.
That is the response I hear. Although you want to extend that now for another 2 years, but let's not go down that road. Touche. I lost track. But in particular, I'm not sure. I guess it's in Plan 2002 and Plan 2035, I'm thinking more 2002, there was a metric that we were supposed to have so much acre, it's also in your Park and Planning's Park 2040 plan, so many acres per 1,000 people of parkland. And we are, in terms of a lot of the service areas of the county, we are far, far short, and there's not even land available to buy. I know that because my district is way short, and there's not a whole lot of available land.
Yeah, the goal from Plan 2035 was 24,769 acres within easements. I'd have to look at that goal from the Parks Plan if it breaks it down per capita, and I can certainly
I thought that was ag easements.
I'm sorry?
I thought that was agricultural easements.
Right, agricultural.
Yeah, I'm talking parks.
Oh, parks, okay.
You know, 'cause there's a separate number for how much park acres there should be.
We'll get that.
And in the subdivision regulations, there's supposed to be so much set aside of open space in the subdivision approvals, right?
For open space for subdivision, I don't know if it was, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if there's one specifically through the subdivision process. I'll have to.
I thought it was like 15% or something.
We'll check on
They
Yeah,
would
we'll
know.
check.
I mean, there is mandatory parkland dedication as
Yes,
part of the
part of adequacy.
preliminary plan, but
Yeah.
it has to be, make sense, right? A lot of times it doesn't make sense to give out these disjointed parcels of open space.
Yeah.
So sometimes we do meet it by using private or public facilities instead.
Yeah, there are different methods, and we can talk to Parks about coming in to explain that. They do it in various ways, and sometimes they require land to be dedicated. Sometimes they'll ask for trail improvements. Sometimes they just ask for a fee in lieu of dedication. But I think they are the experts that should probably elaborate more on that.
Mr. Chair, I have a big picture question I'd
Sure.
like to ask. So, as you know, I've been to a few of these rodeos, and we have a very ambitious charge here. We could talk infinitely about any one of these topics. So is there a workflow expectation for how this committee or task force is going to do its work? Because in a perfect world, I'd like to come to these meetings prepared to talk about whatever it is that we're going to talk about that day. But it's a little confusing, right, if we kind of show up and we just kind of randomly access these various topics. So I'm wondering if there's some consensus or some forethinking that's gone into how we're actually going to do all of this work in an efficient way so we don't leave out the important stuff.
I would say not as well formed as we would like. But today was just an overview, and a lot of us to get a sense of what people think we should be doing. The mission statement is there. My personal thought, and I might be chair, but I'm not a dictator. So you know, there's a lot of smart people around the table that know a lot of things. I'm not being funny; it's true. I think we need to have the presentation on how adequacy works, what the rules are, and what the deficiencies are. We need some sort of statistical information about what's literally inadequate. You know, whether it's roads. Park and Planning has data. We have the maps that show level of service across the county, and not just at intersections, but on links. We know where the school overcrowding is. There are maps that show that. So I think we need to talk about the adequacy rules and their deficiencies. We need to talk about the infrastructure we have and what's deficient. And I think you know, beyond that, then we need to talk about how, you know, what changes do we need to try to address these. I mean, that's the general nature that I think this task force is set up to do. If there are other things, and Mr. Halloran comes into play because at the end of the day, if we can't afford it, you know, we can't afford it. So we need to be able to prioritize. I think that's part of what this group needs to do is talk about, well, with the limited funding we have, particularly right now, how do we prioritize? And one of the things that I'm pleased to see in the presentation, I've been disappointed with the council and with Park and Planning on a number of things that are in the Plan 2035 that I think we also put into the Climate Action Plan, which is prioritizing CIP budget. So you've got that on the list, and you're going to come see us tomorrow? Okay, so
Scott's gonna be presenting that tomorrow at Committee of the Whole.
yeah, so those things that have been languishing are, I think we're creating pressure, and I think putting this task force together helped create pressure. So hopefully we can take that information and start making recommendations and get beyond, you know, Plan 2035 has tons of recommendations. They have not been implemented in 10 years. And Plan 2002 had tons of recommendations that weren't implemented. So I think part of what our goal is, I would urge you to go through Plan 2035 and look at if you look at it, there's different chapters, land use, environment, housing, I can't remember. There's a set of policies, and under each policy, strategies? Well, policies, and then there's sub-policies, I forget the exact name, strategies. And there must be 200 across like 8 or 9 categories.
And if you need a link to Plan 2035, Marion will send it out to you. And if you're old school like me and you prefer a nice printed copy, just let us know and we can get one to you.
So is it your expectation or our expectation that legislative recommendations will come out of this, or is it a whole
Yes.
ball of wax, a lot of different?
Well, I think it's a lot of different things, but I mean, clearly our mission is to advise the county council on what steps should be taken. And like, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but when you look at Plan 2035, the 2002 general plan, you can look at items in this PowerPoint for downtowns, create tax incentive districts. Have we created them? Maybe a couple in certain locations, but parking districts.
We have created, the council has created several tax increment financing districts, but for a variety of reasons, they
So
are
in
not.
Westphalia and on 301.
Yeah, there's
not exactly consistent with Plan 2035.
Yep, and there's several that have been created, but I don't know that any of them are functioning as intended. So
Yes. So there's a lot of things that have been already proposed that have not been implemented, and frankly, we should be prioritizing the things that we want to see implemented. So I hope that answers your question.
It helps a little bit. You know what I'm asking. I would hate to just wander, and at the end of this, we have some stuff, but I mean, because like there's a lot of work here.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining, but I'd like to do it in an efficient way. I'd like to come prepared. I'd like to know before we arrive at a meeting, kind of generally what we might be talking about, just so we kind of have some perspective. That's just my bus budget kind of stuff.
Very good point, and this is not a criticism because Park and Planning is doing so many different things, but we didn't get the PowerPoint until today probably, at least I didn't.
Friday,
I got it today. But we should be, whatever we're doing, we should be distributing, and I guess we should talk about the presentations for the next meeting, but I think APF and also what we need to do to get details on particular infrastructure items that are deficient or where they stand.
So I
and we
think
probably need some budget information in terms of what's our bonding capacity going forward, which is probably like 0.
So I think what I heard for the presentation is APF, how it works, and then some statistics on what is adequate, what is inadequate. You mentioned level of service school. But
Go back a second. On APF, how it works, that's important, but I don't want to spend 40 minutes on how it works. I think we spend 10 minutes on how it works and 20 or 30 minutes on how to fix it.
Okay. I think we can do that. We can definitely do that for the next meeting.
This is your dream situation.
That'll
You
be
can tell us how to
it'll be
fix everything.
Katina's show. Y'all will not hear my voice on
I'm
that.
going to be honest, because the APF is probably one of the oldest discussions, and so I can sit there and give some suggestions, but we have been, we have been hoping that we could get your support to do a study, because APF is highly complicated and it takes more than our planning staff to get through that and on the fix-it part. So it's important that you understand how it works, how effective or ineffective it's been. I'll share the suggestions that we have previously made on this. But as far as the overarching goal, it just needs an overhaul, and we're going to need some.
Well, I'll touch on that real quick. Bring your, just doing the math on the calendar. Send us some suggestions about a study, and either this task force at this next meeting can make a recommendation to the county council that is included in Park and Planning's budget.
You just made me a very happy person.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I really do, because I
Well,
think this is long overdue.
Well, Mr. Tubman's correct. Mr. Tubman, were you on Commission 2000?
I was involved with some of the meetings.
Yeah, I
public
mean,
meetings anyway.
we've been around way too long for stuff not to get done. So if we need a study to figure out the best way to move forward, then we need the money in this year's budget, because you're not going to be able to even spend it till July 1st. Maybe you can start talking about spending it, but we need to move expeditiously, because none of us want to waste our time.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I'm going to say one last thing, then I'll turn to Ms. Crooms to hopefully wrap us up. Mr. Foreman doesn't want me to bring this up, but I had a resolution last year that Park and Planning led me down the garden path on building permit allocations. And to do that, and not the way that it was proposed, but to do it in any fashion requires, under the zoning ordinance, that there be a task force or a commission to study the impacts of any allocation program. So this task force, if it stays together long enough, and you're not required to continue on forever, but one of the things this task force I'm looking at long term is being that entity that looks at how do we focus development from a building permit standpoint, not the way it was done before, but this can help serve that purpose. If you want to go down that road of trying to allocate growth, then you need to have a commission that deals with assessing what's working, what's not working, what changes need to be made. I'll turn to Director Crooms.
I was just going to respond a little bit to Mr. Tupman as well, because it's something we're really struggling with in the Climate Implementation Task Force as well. So we were able to put forward 12 strategies, but we had 5 strategies that we tabled, and one of them is this huge one around stormwater and land use, right? And so I don't know, I mean, I don't want to pledge resources that are not mine to pledge, but I mean, I think that having there be an interaction between these groups and having the thoughts that go forward there, also working with that, makes a ton of sense, because we've done some work there. But I will tell you that the level of effort, I mean, we've had we've had a consultant there the whole time to help us. We've had 2 different consultants there the whole time to help us. It's so big of an area that it's really, really challenging to get down to the brass tacks of what we can actually do. So, I mean, I think we can certainly talk about how the County Executives Task Force and this task force can work together to try to get somewhere, but we're struggling with the same thing. Like, getting those implementation measures in this particular area is really hard.
Yes, Dr. Levy.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring up health. And I confess I have not read the plan yet, so I'd love to get it and take a look at it. But how does this overall plan and the priority strategies contribute to the overall health of Prince Georgians? Because I think at the end of the day, the quality of life and health of the residents of the county should be factored into the priority strategy and at every level. Because if we're building things and it's causing people to be less healthy, then I think we are doing them a disservice.
Completely agree with you. Study after study has shown that there is a direct relationship between the quality of the built environment, particularly with multimodal transportation, having walkable facilities, having bikeable facilities, having those facilities in place for people to use them, and they have a direct correlation with health outcomes, particularly with obesity and things like diabetes. And so it's all tied together. I don't know, and Scott, I'm going to look at you real quick. I don't know if there's probably a specific strategy in the plan, but it's not coming to mind right now. Oh, Kiera's got it.
I will say that, again, I was a project manager for Plan 2035, and this is the first plan that the county did in terms of master plan or sector plan that incorporated throughout the plan healthy living, looking at how the built environment affects our residents. We did studies and research showed that the majority of our population was overweight or obese, and then what can we do in the built environment to help that regarding food deserts, walkability, as Tony had mentioned, but everything in the plan is kind of woven through with the aspect of health of our residents. So when you take a look at the plan, you'll see that's a huge component of this plan, and we have strategies and policies that address those.
The word health appears 153 times in Plan 2035. And there's a chapter, hey, the computer did it, not me. There's a
Use
chapter
AI.
or a section called 2035 Healthy Communities Goal.
Okay.
And then there's strategies under that. So yes, when Kier had it, Kier took care of this.
Looking forward to taking a look at it.
So I think that
Just
starts around
implement the
page
plan.
220, so you can skip the first 200 pages and just go right to health. Don't just read all that other stuff until you, yeah,
I'll skim the rest.
yeah, skim the rest, get to the health part.
Okay.
I would have just said you knew it right off the top of your head that it wasn't the computer. I would just float.
And I know how to hit Control F or Apple, Command F, type in health and got the answer.
There you go.
Okay, I think we're just about done. Anybody have anything else? Yeah, sure.
One last question. Is the 2020 evaluation metrics document available?
It's online with the Plan 2035 website, but we'll have Marion send that link out when we send the link to the plan. So we have both of those documents. And we have a few, Adam, a couple of printed copies of that? I don't know how many printed copies we have of that, but if you'd like a printed copy, we can see if
Save a tree,
we can scrap one up.
Use the PDF.
Right. That way you can just do Control F and figure out where what you want to see is there.
Yeah, I have the plan easily reachable on my computer. We need to talk real quickly about future date. Did Marion, you work on that, or Raina, both of you?
Both did. Yes, so we were looking at the next meeting, basically doing the monthly. We were basically looking at doing the monthly. We were aiming for the third Monday of every month. There are a couple months because of holidays. We have to move it to the second Monday of the month, or, around that holiday, June being one, with the county government for Juneteenth Day.
I would just mention if we do the third Monday in April, that's April 15th.
And that's
Myself, Katina, and Scott are going to be out of
Doing your
town.
taxes?
Well, that too. That's still on my list. But no, we'll be at the National Planning Conference on that week, so it may be better to have to get this
Excuse me,
presentation done.
Mr. Phelps, it's April the 22nd.
Oh, it's April 22nd?
Is it
It's
the
the
22nd?
third.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, sir. I don't know if that still conflicts.
Yeah, for folks' benefit,
I'm sorry, the 22nd.
the scheduling, I think the original proposal was 10 a.m., which I thought was great for staff and terrible for constituents. So I suggested late afternoon because my experience in trying to get residents and staff together, you guys are still on the clock, and other folks can hopefully have a flexible schedule and get out early and be available. So that was the planning. That's why it's 3:30, and hopefully we're 60 to 90 minutes is the goal. So hope that works for folks.
So what I'll do is I will send out all the links to all the documents that were discussed. I will send out the mission statement so people can see that. I will give the list of dates as far ahead as Raina and I have figured out, so everyone can see those for the calendar. We will work on, getting the topics for maybe specific days, different meetings, if you're inclined.
Yes.
And that way we can make sure we get the data together for the meetings. And I will make sure that to get the slideshow earlier so people can have a chance to look at it before the meeting. It's just, this one just happened so quickly.
No problem, we understand. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, thank you all very much. We'll see you when? April 22nd?
April 22nd, here.
Yep.
Yep, here.
Thank you.